The dusty saloon doors swung open with a violence that made every man inside reach for his gun. But it was no outlaw who stepped through. It was a woman with fire in her eyes and blood on her sleeve, and she was looking for something these rough men in Deadwood, Dakota territory could not give her. It was the summer of 1876, and the gold rush had turned this remote settlement into a cesspool of greed, violence, and men who saw women as property or prizes. The woman who stood in the doorway was neither. Her name was Catherine Wells, 22 years old, and she had just escaped from the boarding house where she worked after the owner tried to force himself on her. She had fought him off with a kitchen knife, leaving a gash across his forearm that would scar, and now she was here because she had nowhere else to go and $3 to her name. The saloon fell silent. 30 pairs of eyes tracked her movements as she walked to the bar, her brown dress torn at the shoulder, her dark hair falling from its pins. She was beautiful in the way wild things are beautiful, untamed and dangerous if cornered. "Whiskey," she said to the bartender, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "We do not serve women here," the bartender said, but his eyes were not unkind. "Especially not respectable ones." "Then it is fortunate I am not respectable," Catherine said, slamming her fist on the bar. "I said whiskey." A man 3 stools down laughed, a cruel sound. "I will buy the lady a drink. And then she can show me her gratitude upstairs." Catherine turned to face him. He was thick around the middle, with a beard stained yellow from tobacco and eyes that stripped her bare. "I would sooner drink poison," she said. The man stood, his hand moving to his belt. "You got a mouth on you, girl. Someone needs to teach you your place. Sit down, Harker." The voice came from the corner, quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Every man in the saloon tensed. Even Harker, mean as a snake and twice as quick to strike, hesitated. Catherine turned to see who had spoken. The man sat alone at a corner table, his chair tilted back against the wall, a position that gave him a clear view of both doors and every window. He was perhaps 26 or 27, lean and tall even sitting down, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore a dusty black hat, a worn leather vest over a dark shirt, and a gun belt that sat low on his hips with the easy confidence of a man who knew how to use it. "This is none of your concern, Cade," Harker said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I am making it my concern." The man called Cade let his chair fall forward, the legs hitting the floor with a thud that sounded like a gavel. He stood, and Catherine saw she had been right about his height. He was easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of quiet strength that did not need to announce itself. The lady said no, that is the end of it. Harker's face flushed red. "She is no lady. She is the girl from the boarding house, and word is she cut up Jameson pretty bad. Probably a whore who did not want to give him what he paid for." Catherine felt the words like a slap, but before she could respond, Cade moved. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and had Harker by the throat, lifting him half off his feet. "You will apologize," Cade said, his voice still quiet, still calm. Now, Harker made a choking sound, his face turning purple. "Sorry," he gasped. "I am sorry." Cade released him and Harker stumbled backward, catching himself on the bar. He shot Catherine a look of pure hatred, but he kept his mouth shut. After a moment, he pushed past her and out through the saloon doors. The tension in the room broke, and the other patrons returned to their drinks and cards, though Catherine noticed they kept glancing her way. Cade returned to his table and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "You look like you could use a meal more than whiskey," he said. "If you are hungry, you are welcome to join me." Catherine studied him, searching for the angle, the catch. In her experience, men did not help women without expecting something in return. "What do you want?" she asked bluntly. "To buy you supper," Cade said. Nothing more. You can leave any time you like and no one here will bother you again. He paused. Including me. She should have walked away. She should have taken her $3 and left Deadwood on the next stage. But she was hungry and tired and so very alone, and something in this stranger's eyes made her want to trust him even though every hard lesson she had learned told her not to. She sat down. Cade signaled the bartender, who brought over 2 plates of stew and fresh bread. Catherine tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but she had not had a proper meal in 2 days and the food was good. Cade ate in silence, not watching her, not pushing her to talk. It was the silence that undid her. No man has ever treated me with respect, she said suddenly, surprised by her own words. Not my father, who sold me to pay his gambling debts. Not the man who bought me and worked me 16 hours a day in his boarding house. Not the men who stayed there, who thought they could take whatever they wanted because I had no one to protect me. Cade set down his spoon and looked at her directly. Then you have not met me yet, he said simply. Something in Catherine's chest cracked open, a wound she had not known was there. She wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury she could not afford. You do not know me, she said. I could be everything Harker said. I could be a liar and a thief. Are you? Cade asked. No, Catherine said, but I did cut Jameson. He tried to force me and I fought back. He will tell the sheriff I attacked him without cause and no one will believe me over him. I believe you, Cade said. And if the sheriff has questions, he can come find me. My name is Elijah Cade. I have a ranch about 20 miles south of here. It is not much, a cabin, a barn, some cattle, but it is honest work and clean living. I came into town for supplies, but I will be heading back at first light. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I could use help. Someone to cook and keep house. The pay is not much, but room and board are included, and I give you my word you will be safe there. Catherine stared at him. You are offering me a job. You do not know anything about me. I know you are brave enough to defend yourself. I know you are desperate enough to walk into a saloon full of men who would hurt you because you had nowhere else to go. I know you deserve a chance at something better than what you have had. Cade leaned back in his chair. But it is your choice. No one will force you to do anything you do not want to do, not anymore. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes and she blinked them away furiously. She had learned young that tears were weakness, and weakness got you hurt. But this offer, this stranger's kindness, it felt like standing in a warm shaft of sunlight after years in the cold. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because someone did it for me once, Cade said. When I was 15, I was working in a mine in Colorado. The foreman was a drunk who beat his workers and docked our pay for imagined offenses. One day he went too far and I fought back. I thought he would kill me for it, but an older miner pulled him off and got me out of there. He took me to a ranch where he knew they needed hands, vouched for me, gave me a chance at a different life. Cade's eyes grew distant. He died 3 years later, thrown from a horse. But I never forgot what he did for me. The kindness he showed a stupid, angry kid who had nothing and no one. Catherine understood then. This was not about attraction or possession. This was about paying forward a debt that could never be repaid directly. She took a shaky breath. I do not know anything about ranching, she admitted. I do not need a ranch hand. I need someone who can turn dried beef and beans into something edible, who can mend a shirt without leaving it looking like it was savaged by a bear, and who can handle the loneliness. The nearest neighbor is 10 miles away, and it is just me out there. He met her eyes. It is not an easy life, but it is a free one, freedom. Catherine turned the word over in her mind like a gold nugget, testing its weight, its reality. Could she trust this man? Could she take this leap? But what was the alternative? Stay in Deadwood and face Jameson's accusations. Try to make her way to another town with $3 and no references. At least at the ranch she would have shelter and food, and if Elijah Cade proved to be a liar, well, she still had her knife. "I will come," she said. "But I will keep my wages, and if you try anything, I will gut you in your sleep." Cade's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Fair enough, we leave at dawn. There is a boarding house on the edge of town run by a widow named Mrs. Pritchard. She is honest and her doors have locks. I will pay for a room for you tonight." He stood and placed several coins on the table, enough to cover the meal and then some. "I will meet you at the livery at sunrise." "You are trusting me not to run off with your money," Catherine said. "Yes," Cade said simply. "I am." He tipped his hat to her and walked out of the saloon, leaving Catherine alone with a full stomach, a safe place to sleep, and the first flutter of something that might have been hope. She did not run. When the first gray light of dawn crept over the hills, Catherine was waiting at the livery with her few possessions tied in a bundle. Cade arrived leading 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller paint mare. He had cleaned up, shaved, and changed his shirt, and in the morning light Catherine could see him more clearly. He had a strong jaw, a straight nose that had been broken at least once, and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. He looked like a man who had lived hard and survived it. "She is yours to use while you are at the ranch," Cade said, handing her the paint's reins. "Her name is Daisy. She is gentle, good with inexperienced riders." Catherine had ridden exactly twice in her life, both times on old plow horses that barely moved faster than a walk. But she refused to show her nervousness. She tied her bundle to the saddle, and after watching Cade mount his own horse, managed to climb onto Daisy with only moderate awkwardness. The ride south was beautiful. They left behind the chaos of Deadwood, following a trail that wound through pine-covered hills and open meadows dotted with wildflowers. The air smelled of sage and sun-warmed grass, and the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. Catherine, who had spent most of her life in cramped rooms and dirty cities, felt something inside her expand to fill this vast, empty space. Cade did not press her with conversation, for which she was grateful. He pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a creek that ran year-round, the place where he had once seen a grizzly bear and asked if she needed to rest, but otherwise left her to her thoughts. It was a comfortable silence, the kind Catherine had never experienced with a man before. They stopped at midday to water the horses and eat the bread and cheese Cade had packed. Catherine sat on a fallen log, stretching her aching legs, and watched him tend to the animals with easy competence. "You really live out here alone?" she asked. "Mostly," Cade said. "I have 2 ranch hands who come by during calving season and roundup, but the rest of the year it is just me. I prefer it that way." "Does it not get lonely?" "Sometimes," Cade admitted. "But I spent years surrounded by people. In the mines, in bunkhouses, in towns like Deadwood, and I was lonelier then than I ever am by myself. At least out here, I do not have to pretend to be something I am not." Catherine understood that bone deep. She had spent her whole life pretending to be grateful, pretending not to notice the way men looked at her, pretending that each small cruelty did not cut a little deeper. "What do you do with your time?" she asked. "Work, mostly. There are always fences to mend, animals to tend, repairs to make. I read when I can. I have a few books." He glanced at her. "Can you read?" "Yes," Catherine said. "My mother taught me before she died. It is one of the few gifts she gave me." "Then you are welcome to any of the books. There are not many, but they are good ones." Cade stood and brushed the dirt from his pants. "We should keep moving. I want to be home before dark." They reached the ranch in the late afternoon. It was not impressive. A small cabin made of rough-hewn logs, a barn that had seen better days, a chicken coop, and a corral with a half-dozen cattle grazing nearby. But it was clean and well-maintained, and the setting was spectacular. The cabin sat in a small valley surrounded by hills, with a clear stream running behind it and mountains visible in the distance. "It is not much," Cade said, and Catherine heard the defensiveness in his voice, the fear that she would find it lacking. "It is perfect," she said, and meant it. Cade's shoulders relaxed. He dismounted and came to help her down, his hands on her waist, careful and brief. "The cabin is yours tonight. I will sleep in the barn until we can build you a proper room." "It will not take long, I have the lumber." Catherine blinked. "You are giving me the cabin. You are a woman living alone with a man who is a stranger. You need privacy and security." "The barn is fine for me." Cade began unloading the supplies from the packhorse. "There is a bar for the door. Use it. I will not be offended." Catherine felt that crack in her chest widen further. This man, this stranger, was giving her what no one else ever had, the power to say no, to set boundaries, to be safe. She did not know what to do with such a gift. The cabin was small but tidy, with a fireplace, a rough table and chairs, a bed in one corner, and shelves lined with tins and jars. Cade brought in her bundle and the supplies, showing her where things were stored, how to work the pump for water, where he kept the rifle in case of wolves or bears. "I will teach you to shoot properly tomorrow," he said. "Out here, everyone needs to know how to defend themselves." Catherine nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Cade seemed to sense this. "I will leave you to get settled. Come to the barn when you are hungry. I will show you where everything is for cooking and we can make supper together." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Catherine stood in the middle of the cabin, alone for the first time in longer than she could remember, and cried. The first weeks at the ranch passed in a blur of learning. Catherine had thought she knew hard work, but the boarding house had not prepared her for this. There were chickens to feed and eggs to gather, bread to bake, clothes to wash in the stream and hang to dry, meals to prepare over the fireplace, a garden to tend. Her hands, already rough from years of labor, developed new calluses. Her back ached, her shoulders burned, and she had never been happier. Cade was an easy man to live with. He was up before dawn and often worked until after dark. But he always made time to check on her, to answer her questions, to teach her the skills she needed. He showed her how to milk the cow, how to tell when the bread dough had risen enough, how to shoot the rifle without the recoil knocking her flat. He was patient and never made her feel stupid for not knowing something. More than that, he kept his word. He never entered the cabin without knocking. He never touched her without permission. He never looked at her the way other men had, like she was something to consume. He treated her like a person, like someone whose thoughts and opinions mattered, and Catherine found herself blossoming under that respect like a plant finally given water. She learned things about him in fragments. He had been born in Missouri, the youngest of 4 brothers. His mother died when he was young, and his father drank himself to death 2 years later. His brothers scattered, and he had not seen them in over a decade. He had worked as a miner, a ranch hand, a trail driver, saving every penny until he could buy this land. He was 27 years old, and he had never been married. "Did you ever want to be?" Catherine asked one evening as they sat outside the cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. It had become their routine, this quiet time after supper when the work was done and the world was soft with twilight. Cade considered the question. "I suppose I thought about it, the way most men do. But I never met anyone I wanted to spend my life with. Most women want things I cannot give them, a big house, a town nearby, society. This life is too hard, too isolated for most people." "I like it," Catherine said softly. "I like the quiet. I like waking up and knowing no one will hurt me today. I like that the hardest parts are just hard work, not cruelty, not fear." Cade turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were very blue. "You have done good work here, Catherine. Better than I hoped. The cabin is cleaner than it has been in years. The meals are actually worth eating, and you have not complained once, even when I know you have been aching and exhausted." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. She was not used to praise, and she did not know how to accept it. "You have been kind to me," she said instead. "Kinder than anyone has ever been." "I will not forget that." "It is not kindness," Cade said. "It is how you deserve to be treated, how everyone deserves to be treated." They fell into silence, and Catherine felt something shift between them. The air seemed heavier, charged with a possibility she did not dare name. She had been at the ranch for almost 2 months, and in that time Cade had become more than her employer. He was her friend, her teacher, her protector. But was he something more? Did she want him to be? The answer came to her as she lay in bed that night, listening to the wind whisper through the pines. Yes, she wanted more. She wanted to know if his hands, so gentle with horses and calloused from work, would be gentle with her. She wanted to know if his rare smiles could become common. She wanted to know what it would be like to build a life with someone who saw her as an equal, a partner, not property. But wanting and having were different things, and Catherine had learned not to reach for what was not offered. The next morning, she was in the garden pulling weeds when Cade came striding up from the barn, his face grim. "We have a problem," he said. 3 of the cattle are missing. The fence has been cut." Catherine stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Rustlers? Probably. There has been trouble in the area lately. Small ranchers like me are easy targets." Cade ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I need to track them, see if I can find where they took the animals, but I do not want to leave you here alone." "I can take care of myself," Catherine said, and she meant it. She had proven that already. "I know you can," Cade said. "But if these are the same men who hit the Morrison Ranch last month, they are dangerous. They did not just take cattle. They burned the barn and beat Morrison so badly he still has not recovered." He looked at her, and Catherine saw real fear in his eyes. "I need you to come with me. I need to know you are safe." They rode out within the hour, following the trail left by the stolen cattle. It led south and west, into rougher country where the hills were steeper and the vegetation thicker. Cade moved with the focused intensity of a man who had tracked game and men before, reading signs Catherine could not see: a broken branch here, a hoofprint there, a patch of disturbed grass. They found the cattle in a box canyon, penned in with ropes strung between trees. 3 men sat around a small fire, passing a bottle and laughing. They did not see Cade and Catherine until it was too late. "That is far enough," Cade said, his rifle aimed steadily at the men. Catherine had drawn the smaller rifle he had taught her to shoot, her heart hammering but her hands steady. The 3 men scrambled to their feet. They were rough-looking, unshaven and dirty, with the hard eyes of men who took what they wanted and did not care who got hurt. The one in the middle, taller than the others and with a scar bisecting his lip, grinned. "Well now, looks like we got ourselves a hero," and he brought his woman. "Those are my cattle," Cade said calmly. "I am taking them back. You can ride away now and we will call it even. Or," Scarred Lip said, "we can kill you and take the woman." "She is prettier than the cattle." Catherine felt ice run down her spine, but Cade did not flinch. "You can try," he said. "But I will kill at least 2 of you before I go down, and my woman there is a good shot. She will get the 3rd. Are 3 cows worth 3 lives?" The men exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. They had expected easy prey, not armed resistance. "You are bluffing," Scarred Lip said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Cade asked. "Test me if you want, but know that I have killed men before and I will do it again to protect what is mine." The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Catherine kept her rifle trained on the man to the left, a wiry fellow with nervous eyes. She had never shot at a person before, and she prayed she would not have to start now. But if it came down to it, she would. She would protect Cade the way he had protected her. Finally, Scarred Lip spat into the fire. "This is not worth it. Come on, boys. Plenty of other ranches to hit." They mounted their horses and rode out, but not before Scarred Lip gave Cade a look that promised this was not over. Cade did not lower his rifle until they were out of sight, and even then he remained tense, watchful. "We need to get back to the ranch," he said. "Now." They drove the cattle hard, arriving home as the sun was setting. Cade immediately began reinforcing the fences, working by lantern light until Catherine came out and physically took the hammer from his hands. "You need to rest," she said. "You have been going since dawn." "I need to keep you safe," Cade said, and the rawness in his voice made Catherine's breath catch. "I am safe," she said softly, "because of you. You have kept me safe from the moment we met." Cade looked at her, really looked at her, and Catherine saw something in his face that made her heart race. "Catherine," he said, her name a question and a prayer. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell the sweat and leather and something uniquely him. "No man has ever treated me with respect," she said, echoing the words she had spoken that first night. "No man has ever made me feel like I mattered, like my life had value, like I was worth protecting. No man has ever looked at me the way you do." "How do I look at you?" Cade asked, his voice rough. "Like I am precious," Catherine whispered, "like you would burn the world down to keep me safe." "I would," Cade said simply. "Catherine, I did not plan this. I did not bring you here expecting to feel this way. But somewhere between that first night in Deadwood and now, you stopped being an obligation and became everything. I wake up wanting to see your smile. I work harder because I want to build something worthy of you. I lie awake at night thinking about you in the cabin, wondering if you are warm enough, comfortable enough, happy enough." He reached up slowly, telegraphing the movement, and cupped her face with one rough hand. "I am in love with you, I have been for weeks. But I did not want to say anything because you have been through hell, and you deserve the freedom to choose your own path without pressure from me." Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for once they were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of joy, of relief, of coming home after a lifetime of wandering. "You stupid, wonderful man," she said, her voice breaking. "I love you too. I have been falling in love with you since you stepped between me and Harker, since you offered me a job and asked for nothing in return, since you gave me the cabin and slept in the barn, since you taught me to shoot and trusted me to watch your back. I love you, Elijah Cade, and I want to stay here with you for the rest of my life." Cade's thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, wiping away her tears. "Are you sure? This life is hard, Catherine. This ranch barely turns a profit. We will never be rich. There will be long winters and short summers and loneliness and danger." "I have been poor my whole life," Catherine said. "I have been cold and hungry and alone, but I have never had what you are offering me, a partner, an equal, someone who sees me as more than a burden or a convenience. I do not need riches, Elijah. I need you." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something fragile that might break. But Catherine had been broken and rebuilt too many times to shatter now. She kissed him back with all the passion and hope and love she had kept locked inside, and when they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "Marry me," Cade said. "Not because you owe me anything, not because you need protection, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Marry me and be my partner, my wife, my everything." "Yes," Catherine said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, you ridiculous man, of course I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in Deadwood, in the small church at the edge of town. Mrs. Pritchard, the widow who had given Catherine shelter that first night, stood as her witness. A ranch hand named Baylor, who sometimes worked for Cade, stood for him. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional, But when Cade slipped a simple gold band onto Catherine's finger and kissed her as his wife, she felt like the richest woman in the world. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, which Cade had cleaned and filled with wildflowers. He carried her over the threshold and Catherine laughed, giddy with happiness and nerves and anticipation. "I have never done this before," she admitted. "I do not know what I am doing." "Neither do I," Cade said, setting her gently on her feet. "But we will figure it out together. We will figure everything out together." And they did. He was gentle and patient, and if there was awkwardness and uncertainty, there was also laughter and tenderness and a bone-deep sense of rightness. Catherine had spent her life being taken from, used, diminished. But Cade gave her pleasure and respect and love, and in doing so taught her that she was worthy of receiving. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Catherine's head on Cade's chest, his hand stroking her hair. "I never thought I could be this happy," she said softly. "I never thought happiness was something people like me were allowed to have." "You are allowed everything," Cade said fiercely. "Happiness, safety, love, dreams. You are allowed to want things and reach for them. You are allowed to take up space in the world and demand respect, and anyone who tries to tell you different will answer to me." Catherine tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. "I love you," she said, simple and true. "I love you too," Cade replied, "more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." The first year of their marriage was not easy. There were challenges: a harsh winter that killed 2 of their cattle, a drought that shriveled the garden, a pack of wolves that had to be driven off, the constant struggle to make ends meet. But there were also moments of profound joy. Catherine learned to ride well enough to help with the cattle. Cade built her a bookshelf and surprised her with 3 new books purchased during a trip to town. They danced in the cabin to music only they could hear. They made love under the stars, in the meadow behind the ranch, on blankets spread beside the stream. They also faced down Scarlett and his gang one more time. The rustlers came back in the dead of winter, thinking the couple would be easy pickings. But Catherine and Cade fought side by side, their rifles cracking in the cold air, and drove the thieves off for good. Scarlett took a bullet to the shoulder from Catherine's rifle, and the gang never bothered them again. "You are terrifying when you are angry," Cade said afterward, looking at his wife with a mixture of awe and desire. "I learned from the best," Catherine replied, reloading her rifle with steady hands. By the end of their first year together, the ranch was thriving. They had expanded the herd, planted a larger garden, and even started talking about building a bigger cabin. But the best news came on a snowy February morning when Catherine woke up sick for the 3rd day in a row. "I think I am pregnant," she told Cade, equal parts terrified and elated. Cade's face went through a dozen emotions: shock, fear, wonder, joy. "Are you sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor, but Elijah, I am scared. I do not know anything about being a mother. What if I am terrible at it? What if I make all the same mistakes my parents made?" Cade pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You will be an amazing mother because you know what it is like to be hurt, and you will never let anyone hurt our child the way you were hurt, and you will not be alone. We will do this together, just like everything else." Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1877. The labor was long and hard, attended by Mrs. Pritchard, who had ridden out from Deadwood to help. Catherine thought she might die from the pain, but when the midwife placed the squalling, red-faced baby in her arms, all the fear and agony vanished. "He is perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He is ours," Cade said, his own eyes wet as he looked at his wife and son. "What should we call him?" They named him Samuel, after Cade's older brother. He was a healthy baby with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and he was loved beyond measure. Cade proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Samuel when he cried, making silly faces to coax out smiles, singing off-key lullabies that made Catherine laugh. Watching her husband with their son, Catherine felt her heart expand to a size she had not known was possible. This man, this good, kind, strong man, had given her everything she had never dared to dream of: safety, respect, love, family. She had gone from having nothing and no one to having everything that mattered. 2 years later, they had a daughter. Elizabeth came into the world on a hot July afternoon, smaller than Samuel had been but just as loud and insistent. Samuel, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her, touch her, help with everything. "Gentle," Catherine would remind him, guiding his pudgy hands. "Be gentle with your sister." "Gentle," Samuel would repeat solemnly, his little face serious with concentration. The cabin they had built was bigger now, with 2 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. The ranch had grown 2 more cattle, more land, enough income that they could afford small luxuries like store-bought fabric and real coffee. They had hired 2 permanent ranch hands, young men who were respectful and hardworking, and who built their own bunkhouse near the barn. Life was not perfect. There were still hard times, a particularly brutal winter when they lost half the herd, a summer fever that nearly took Samuel when he was 4, the constant wear and worry of running a ranch. But they faced it all together, Cade and Catherine, equal partners in all things. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Cade surprised Catherine with a trip to town. They left the children with Mrs. Pritchard and spent the night at the hotel, having dinner at the nicest restaurant in Deadwood. It was not fancy by big city standards, but to Catherine it was perfect. "You ever regret it?" Cade asked over dessert. "Staying here, choosing this life, you could have gone anywhere, done anything." Catherine reached across the table and took his hand. "I chose you, I chose us. And I would make that choice 1,000 times over. You gave me something no one else ever had, Elijah. You gave me respect and freedom and the chance to be myself. You gave me a family. You gave me love. How could I ever regret that?" Cade lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I was the one who was given a gift that night in Deadwood. You walked into that saloon like an avenging angel, and you changed my life completely. I thought I was happy before, content with my solitary life. But you showed me what real happiness was. You and our children are my everything, Catherine." They went back to the hotel room and made love with the slow, familiar intensity of 2 people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. Later, lying in the unfamiliar softness of the hotel bed, Catherine thought about the girl she had been 5 years ago, scared, alone, convinced she would never know kindness or love. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, would she believe it? Would she have the courage to take that first leap of faith? But she could not go back, and she did not want to. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She was Catherine Cade now, wife and mother, rancher and partner. She was strong and loved and free, and that was everything. The years rolled on, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Samuel grew tall and strong, with his father's quiet confidence and his mother's fierce determination. Elizabeth was smaller and more delicate, but with a core of steel that reminded everyone who her parents were. When Samuel was 8 and Elizabeth 6, Catherine gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named James and Robert. "You realize we are now outnumbered," Cade said, looking at the 4 children with mock despair. "We were always outnumbered," Catherine replied, laughing. "Children have endless energy. We never stood a chance." But they thrived on the chaos. The cabin was loud and messy and full of life, and Catherine loved every minute of it. She taught the children to read and write, to cook and clean, to work hard and treat others with respect. Cade taught them to ride and rope, to shoot and track, to love the land and the life they had been given. On Samuel's 12th birthday, Cade took him aside for a serious talk. "You are old enough now to understand some things," he said. "Your mother and I did not have easy lives before we found each other. We both knew what it was like to be hurt, to be treated as less than human. But we also learned that kindness is a choice and respect is something everyone deserves. I want you to remember that, Sam. No matter who you meet or what you do with your life, treat people with respect, especially women. Your mother is the strongest person I know, but she should have never had to be that strong just to survive." Samuel listened gravely. He adored his mother and would have fought anyone who spoke ill of her. "I will, Pa," he promised. "I will be like you. Be better than me," Cade said. "That is what every father wants for his son." The years continued their steady march. Samuel grew into a fine young man and eventually fell in love with a girl from a neighboring ranch, a smart and capable young woman named Mary, who Catherine approved of immediately. They married when Samuel was 21, and Cade helped them start their own small ranch nearby. Elizabeth, true to her nature, had no interest in marrying young. She wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the Dakota Territory. Catherine and Cade gave her their blessing and enough money to be safe, and Elizabeth left for Denver when she was 18, promising to write regularly. The twins, inseparable as always, talked about joining the cavalry, about seeking their fortunes in California, about a dozen different dreams. But they were still young, only 16, and Cade told them there was time to decide. On a cool evening in the fall of 1891, Cade and Catherine sat on the porch they had built years ago, watching the sun set over the ranch. They were both in their 40s now, with silver threading through their hair and lines around their eyes. But they were still strong, still healthy, still deeply in love. "Do you remember that first night?" Catherine asked, leaning her head on Cade's shoulder. "When I walked into that saloon and you defended me?" "Every detail," Cade said. "You looked like you were ready to fight the whole room. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." "I was terrified," Catherine admitted. "I had no plan, no hope. I just knew I could not go back to that boarding house." "Best decision you ever made," Cade said, kissing the top of her head. "Walking through those doors changed both our lives." Catherine thought about the journey they had taken, from strangers to partners to lovers to parents. It had not been easy, but it had been real and honest and good. She thought about the woman she had been, convinced that no man would ever treat her with respect, and the man who had looked at her and said, "Then you have not met me yet." He had kept that promise. For 15 years of marriage and counting, Elijah Cade had treated her with respect, with love, with the kind of partnership she had not known existed. He had given her a home and a family. He had given her safety and freedom. He had given her himself completely and without reservation. "I love you," she said softly. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Cade replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine. You and our children and this life we built together. I would not change a single moment." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. In the barn, one of the horses whickered softly. Inside the house, James and Robert were arguing good-naturedly about something, their voices carrying through the open window. This was home. This was family. This was love. And it all started because a desperate woman walked into a saloon looking for help, and a good man decided to give it. The years that followed were gentler. Samuel and Mary had 3 children of their own, and Catherine delighted in being a grandmother. Elizabeth returned from her travels after 5 years, full of stories and experiences, and eventually settled in Deadwood, where she opened a dress shop that became quite successful. The twins did join the cavalry, serving honorably for 4 years before returning to help run the ranch. By the time Cade and Catherine celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1901, the ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. They had weathered economic depressions and harsh weather, disease and accidents, but they had survived and thrived because they did it together. The party was held at the ranch, with family and friends coming from all over. Samuel and his family were there, of course, and Elizabeth with her new beau, a banker from Deadwood who treated her like a queen. James and Robert, now grown men of 23, brought their best girls. Mrs. Pritchard, elderly now but still sharp as a tack, made the journey from town. Even some of the old ranch hands who had worked for them over the years came to celebrate. As Catherine looked around at the gathered crowd, at the children running and playing, at the tables laden with food, at her husband standing tall and proud beside her, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love, it had all come from a single choice made on a desperate night 15 years ago. Speech, someone called, and the crowd took up the chant. Cade held up his hands for silence, then drew Catherine close to his side. 25 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the gathering, I met a woman in a Deadwood saloon. She was brave and beautiful and fiercer than anyone I had ever met. She told me that no man had ever treated her with respect. He looked down at Catherine, his eyes soft with love. And I told her, then you have not met me yet. The crowd laughed, a warm sound full of affection. I made her a promise that night, Cade continued. I promised to treat her with the respect she deserved, to give her a safe place to land, to be someone she could trust. And she took a leap of faith by trusting me. That trust, that faith, is the foundation of everything we have built. This ranch, our family, the life we share, it all exists because Catherine was brave enough to believe in me, and because I was lucky enough to find her. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. You are the love of my life, Catherine Cade. You are my partner, my best friend, my everything. Thank you for 25 years of love and laughter and life. Here is to 25 more. To 25 more, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Catherine kissed her husband, not caring who was watching, and tasted salt on her lips. His tears or hers, she could not tell. It did not matter. They were together and they always would be. The party went on long into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Catherine danced with Cade, with her sons, with her grandsons. She laughed with the women and hugged her children and watched her husband joke with the men who respected and admired him. Later, after everyone had gone home or bedded down in the barn or spare rooms, Cade and Catherine walked down to the stream behind the house. It was the same stream that had been there the first day she arrived, still running clear and cold over smooth stones. The moon was full, turning the water to liquid silver. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had never met? Catherine asked, slipping her hand into Cade's. Sometimes, Cade admitted, I think I would have been fine, comfortable. But I would never have known what I was missing. I would never have known what it was like to be truly happy, truly complete. I would have survived, Catherine said. I always found a way to survive, but I would not have lived. There is a difference between surviving and living, and you taught me that. They stood in silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Then Catherine spoke again, her voice thoughtful. I want you to know something, Elijah. If I had the chance to live my life over, to erase all the pain and hardship I went through before I met you, I would not take it. Because all of that, as terrible as it was, led me to you. And you are worth everything I suffered to find you. Cade pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I do not know what I did to deserve you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But I thank God every day that you walked into my life. You defended me when no one else would, Catherine said simply. You saw me as a person, not a thing to be used. You kept your promise, Elijah. Every single day for 25 years, you have treated me with respect and love. You gave me the life I never thought I could have." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they lay down in the bed they had shared for a quarter century, Catherine felt the same sense of peace and contentment she had felt since the beginning. This was where she belonged. This was home. The final chapter of their story unfolded gradually over years and decades. They grew old together, their hair turning white, their movements slowing. They watched their children have children who had children of their own. The ranch passed to James and Robert, who ran it with the same dedication and integrity their parents had shown. Cade's health began to fail when he was 68. It was nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. Catherine cared for him with the same fierce devotion he had always shown her, refusing to let anyone else take over his care. "You do not have to do this," Cade said one afternoon as she helped him walk from the bed to his chair by the window. "The children could help." "I want to," Catherine said firmly. "You took care of me from the moment we met. Let me take care of you now." On a snowy December morning in 1916, Elijah Cade died peacefully in his sleep, with Catherine holding his hand. He was 69 years old, and he had lived a good life. A life filled with love and work and family and purpose. Catherine grieved deeply, but she did not break. She had been broken before, long ago, and Cade had helped her put the pieces back together. She carried his memory with her like a torch, lighting the way forward. She lived for another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had treated a desperate woman with respect and changed both their lives. She made sure they understood what a rare and precious gift that had been. On a warm spring morning in 1924, Catherine Cade died quietly in her sleep. She was 70 years old, and she had lived more than she had ever dreamed possible. Her last thoughts were of Elijah and of the night he had looked at her and said, "Then you have not met me yet." She was buried beside him on the ranch they had built together, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, and they told stories about the love that had created this family, this legacy. Samuel stood at his mother's grave, now an old man himself, and remembered the lessons she had taught him. "Treat everyone with respect," he said to his own grandchildren who clustered around him. "That is what my father taught me and what his life showed me. It is the most important lesson you will ever learn." And so the story of Elijah and Catherine Cade became family legend, passed down through generations. The story of a cowboy and a desperate woman, of respect and trust and love. The story of two people who found each other in the darkness and built a life together in the light. Their ranch still stands, run now by their great-great-grandchildren, who remember the legacy their ancestors left them. On the mantel in the main house sits a photograph, faded and creased with age, of a tall man with blue eyes and a woman with a fierce smile standing side by side, their hands clasped together. Beneath it, engraved on a small brass plate, are the words that started it all. "Then you have not met me yet." And that is how a story that began with pain and fear ended with love and legacy. Proof that kindness can change everything, that respect is the foundation of real love. And that sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to see another's worth to change the course of history.